evening, everybody. My name is Ben Heckman. I'm the library director, and I want to welcome you to this program this evening, whether you are online or in person with us. As your library, we love to be the place where important conversations like this can go on and important learnings, and we can understand what's going on better in our community, as well as the larger community of Columbus and around the world. So I want to thank you all for being a part of this important program tonight. And with that, I'd like to introduce Mayor Ben Kessler.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Ben Heckman. Ben Heckman, everybody give Ben a round of applause. He's the best. You are the best. First off, I do want to thank the library for hosting this conversation this evening. I want to welcome those who are with us online and recognize that we do have electeds among us, but they are virtual this evening. The City of Bexley is one of the lead sponsors of the Building Inclusive Communities Initiative. And there was a slide just before this one that talked about other folks who help sponsor. Building Inclusive Communities seeks to expand positive conversations about solutions to our region's housing challenges and our extreme geographic and economic segregation in Central Ohio. And it speaks volumes to the importance of these issues that Building Inclusive Communities has 24 sponsors and partner organizations, including the City of Bexley and the City of Worthington. I also want to thank Kathy Fox, who helped organize this evening as a staff member with Building Inclusive Communities. So thanks to all of those sponsors and those who helped organize this. This evening, we do have a really important program about an issue that's urgent, not just in our region, but here in Bexley. Today, more than ever, the concept of accessibility and housing and inclusivity in our communities is vital. I don't know if any of you have tried to buy a house recently or rent an apartment or talk to somebody who's done that. I don't know if I'm sure you've heard about the spiraling costs of housing that are exponentially higher even than the inflation rate that we've all been dealing with. So as housing costs go up, this conversation becomes more and more urgent. And congratulations, Central Ohio. It's only going to become more urgent because we have this little teeny company called Intel coming to Central Ohio, which is going to place further pressure on housing. And Columbus is an economic driver in Ohio. It is the growth capital of Ohio. It will continue to be. And so these conversations will continue to be incredibly important. The old convention that we live in still today in Bexley is that affordable housing equals last resort housing. And that is a paradigm that we must shift. It's more than practical, it's moral. How do we take affordable housing from being simply last resort housing to a new convention where it's attainable housing that's well maintained, that is connected, interconnected with our community, that provides dignified living experiences for all. So today in Bexley, we do have affordable housing. We have quite a bit of it. Too often that affordable housing is not connected to other neighborhoods. It is segregated. It is dilapidated. It's a source of stress to those who live in it. About 10, 15 years ago, our school district did a whole program around developmental assets. And from that was an organization founded, DARN, which is Developmental Assets Resource Network. I'm going to butcher this. There's something like 40 developmental assets that they studied. All too often, the current affordable housing in Bexley doesn't fulfill many of those check boxes for developmental assets for our community. And location matters. Building Inclusive Communities is a offshoot of Move to Prosper, which is an organization in Central Ohio that's helping to bolster the concept that location matters, that we take folks who are in distressed living situations and we bring them into areas of opportunity, and those families are thriving. And it's a beautiful, beautiful success story. And we in Bexley want to be a part of that success story. We want to take the resources that we have, the things that we have been gifted with as a community, and share those resources and build those inclusive communities. So with that, I am very happy to introduce you to our moderator this evening, Carlie, the Executive Director of the Affordable Housing Alliance of Central Ohio. Carlie, thank you.
I will trade you if I can.
Okay.
Thank you. For me at home, please let me know if you've got any trouble with that. What a fantastic audience here in person for the first time in 2 years, I think, for us at least. I'm assuming all of you are here because you share a passion for housing, not because it's 9,000 degrees outside and you're all looking for an air-conditioned room. I am Carlie Booz. I am the Executive Director at the Affordable Housing Alliance of Central Ohio. I want to just briefly introduce the agenda for this evening with you. We've got a really great lineup of speakers. I want to give another round of thanks to Ben for allowing us to use their space, for Mayor Kassler for introducing us and for having the opportunity for this discussion, and for all of the sponsors who are making tonight possible. I'm going to introduce both of our panelists here in just a moment. Before I do that, I want to introduce a little bit about who we are at the Alliance and what our work looks like in this space. And I want to also let you know that there's going to be plenty of time for questions and answers. We really want tonight to be an engaging discussion. We want to hear what your thoughts are, what your ideas are, and really participate as a community together. So the Affordable Housing Alliance of Central Ohio, if you've not had the chance to look at us and to speak with us yet, our mission is to make sure that Central Ohio has the tools that it needs to respond to our housing challenges. And that is a lot of different things in a lot of different spaces. It incorporates building and development and construction, incorporates home ownership, and how we make sure that there's a clear pathway for all of our residents to lay down roots in our community. And it encompasses economic mobility and making sure that we are using housing as a foundation for growth and prosperity and for thriving as a community together. At the Alliance, we do this work through a variety of techniques. We do a lot of education. We like to talk to people about it. We like to hear what's going on in your house, in your neighborhood. We do a lot of research. I think it's really important for us to understand what our landscape is. What does Central Ohio's housing conditions look like today? What are our peer communities that we're walking closer and closer towards? And do we want to go down that path? And are there better opportunities for us to explore? And we also do a lot of facilitation. So do you have an idea? Do you have a suggestion? Let's take that nugget and polish it and shape it and build it as a community and create the kind of programming that we need to be the first community in the country to solve the affordable housing crisis. I will note that our work is informed by the fact that we're a membership organization, and our members are really intentionally curated from a variety of perspectives across the housing field. So we know what this crisis looks like for somebody who works in the shelter system or somebody who is homeless. We know what it looks like for landlords and for property owners and for property management companies, because they're an integral part of our system as well. We know what it looks like for lenders and investors and banks and syndicators and people who see the money side of the challenge. And we know what it looks like from our philanthropic community and our service sectors who have the wide angle lens to understand what the housing crisis means for somebody who is struggling with their health, for somebody who is struggling to age in place, for somebody who is struggling to integrate in our community and adopt us as a hometown, as a new American. So that's where we are as a community. I'd like to set the landscape a little bit for you so you see some of the numbers that I am seeing and you understand what is happening in Central Ohio. One of the things that I need to underscore is that we are in crisis mode. In Franklin County alone, without even looking towards our neighbors, in Franklin County alone, 54,000 households are paying more than half of their income towards rent or towards their mortgage. And that is not sustainable. It's certainly not sustainable as an individual, and it is definitely not sustainable for us as a community. When you're paying more than half of your income towards rent, that means that you are making life and death decisions every day. You are choosing between your housing costs and your insulin, right? You are choosing between sitting at home at the kitchen table and helping your kid with their homework so that they can get a good quality education and a healthy meal at night, or going and pulling a second or even a third shift so that you can cover the mortgage costs. Having 54,000 of our neighbors in that position is precarious for all of us. Another thing we know is that this is a problem that is getting bigger, not smaller. Not only do we have intel on these amazing economic development opportunities coming to our community that are objectively great, but we also know even before that, we have not been building enough homes to keep up with our population growth. We should be building 14,000 new houses a year. Single family homes, multifamily homes, accessory dwelling units, you name it, but we need 14,000 of them. And even on our best year, we're building 11. So every year we are digging that hole deeper and deeper and deeper, which is why we are seeing costs go up so significantly for every class in our society. We also know that there's an incredibly uneven need. that this crisis affects households that are the lowest income spectrum more. There are only 32 homes that are available and affordable for every 100 extremely low income families who needs it. What that means, if you're somebody who received disability, you're unable to work, if you are a senior on fixed income, if you are a young person who can't go to work yet because you're in school, this is affecting you more than others. But we do know that it is a workforce problem as well. Right now, the housing wage in Franklin County is $19.83 an hour. That means if you want to afford just a plain old modest, no frills 2-bedroom apartment, you better be making $19.83 an hour, or else you are not cutting it. And we also know that only 1 out of Ohio's 10 most common jobs pays that rate. So this is an issue for our workforce as well. And then I hate to do all of these stats and then end on a bummer note. So one of the things I always like to stress is Central Ohio is so well positioned to be the first community in the world to solve this, the first. We have things going for us that nobody in the world can claim. One of the things that people don't know is that we are a hub for the affordable housing industry, that people who do this work nationwide and are experts in it call Central Ohio home. They have their headquarters here, and they've learned what didn't work in San Francisco and what didn't work in Austin, what didn't work in Colorado and Denver. And they want to take those lessons and they want to apply them here. We have members of the Power 100 that are part of our membership. We have members who are the top 50 affordable housing developers and owners who are part of our membership, all of them here in Franklin County. There are always questions about what COVID-19 has done for that underlying landscape. And I think it goes without saying that nothing good has come out of COVID-19. Right now, 22% of all of Ohio's renters have no idea how they're going to pay rent next month. So think about that. 1 in 5 renters have little or no confidence in their ability to pay rent. Do you know 5 renters? I do. Statistically speaking, your cousins, your colleagues, your friends, your neighbors, if you know 5 people who rent, you know somebody who is struggling and looking down the barrel of an eviction right now. And we know that's translating to evictions because we have now had over 32,000 evictions filed just since COVID-19 began. Our eviction rate is now outpacing what it was before the pandemic. We have caught up and then we have exceeded over what that rate was. Finally, just because I know that this is a conversation about inclusivity and diversity and welcomingness, I want to talk a little bit about what affordable housing is and who lives there. By and large, because of the tools that we have created as a nation, affordable housing tends to serve people who earn 60% of the area median income. It's a very nerdy, very data-driven sort of number. But what that essentially is a blue-collar worker, maybe an early career white-collar worker. For a family of 3, that's somebody who's earning $50,000 a year or so. So there are a lot of jobs that fall into that category. I've pulled out a couple here: corrections officers, librarians, graphic designers. That's what 60% AMI serves. And when we are talking about the low-income housing tax credit program, one of our preeminent affordable housing programs in the country, that's who it is initially designed to cater to and to serve, who it's affordable for. But who moves into it? We know that over half of people who move into LIHTC housing come from less than 5 miles away. So they're our neighbors. It's people who are already here in our community. They're just underwater. They're just struggling. And what this does is it gives them a place to thrive where they are not scraping every month to come up with the rent. We also know that affordable housing has a higher than traditional rate of workforce activity, but there's actually a 3% higher workforce participation rate in affordable housing because, again, this is a workforce crisis. We also know that there's a higher than average rate of people who have disabilities, of people who are aging. In fact, 1/3 of affordable housing residents are seniors. We also know that this is a problem that's affecting people not just in their individual capacity, but who they are outside of their home. So if you are an employer, for instance, we recently conducted a survey specifically of Central Ohio employers, and 80% of them said that our housing crisis is affecting worker productivity and worker morale and is making it harder for them to hire and recruit and retain employees. And look at what's happening with inflation, and look at what's happening with our economy. Do we need one more thing working against us as opposed to for us? We also know that 76% of educators say that it's a problem for them in their classrooms, makes it harder for them to teach, makes it harder for them to be effective, makes it harder for them to do their job when they are working with our children. Again, I don't want to end on a bummer because I've got to say that we have the people in this community who know these issues through and through. We have leadership who recognize it and is working every day to solve it. And I'd like to introduce two of our panelists now who are going to come up and tell us a little bit more about their work and how they fit into this conversation. So I'm going to introduce both of them to begin with, and I will ask Rachel to come up first. Dr. Rachel Kleit is the OSU Associate Dean and Professor of City and Regional Planning. Rachel is also the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Planning Literature. Her research focuses on affordable housing and social inequality. And among many housing topics, Rachel has written on the social network impacts of mixed income housing. Rachel is also going to be presenting tonight information prepared by Dr. Jason Reese, who unfortunately was not able to join us. He is an associate professor of city and regional planning at The Ohio State University, go Bucks, and faculty affiliate at the Kirwan Institute for the Study of Race and Ethnicity. His research includes the role of planning in fostering a built and social environment which supports a just city and healthy communities. After Rachel speaks, our second panelist will be Dr. Kim Campbell, Director of Enrollment Management, Mount Carmel College of Nursing. Prior to serving in this role, she held leadership roles at I Know I Can, Cleveland State University, Bowling Green State University, and the University of Toledo. A dedicated community leader and advocate, Dr. Campbell serves in many volunteer roles, including Vice Chair of the Move to Prosper Board. Thank you both for joining us. Rachel, please.
Thank you, Carlie. So I'm going to spend a little time first talking. What did I just do here? This is the classic moment when the slides go dark. I'm Associate Dean of the College of Engineering, just in case you care about that. I want to talk a little bit about, I'm going to start with Jason Reese's presentation here, because I want him to, he really is focusing on the benefits of inclusive communities, which I think is a place where we need to start our conversation. And Dr. Reese thinks about an inclusive housing market in terms of the equity implications, prosperity implications, and the resilience of our community. When he thinks about those benefits, and he's first starting with equity, we need to make sure that we, when we have inclusive communities, also have inclusive schools. And since schools are geographically based, then housing is a key element in having inclusive neighborhoods and schools. This also reduces the burdens, the inequality that we see on those who are not well served by the market. Markets are really great for serving most of the people, right? There's an equilibrium balance, right? There's a point at which price is determined by the market. And if you are someone who can't afford that price, you're out of luck in the marketplace. And so that means that affordable housing problems, we can't build our way out of them. We have to deliberately have policy to address them. The second thing that inclusive communities do is it creates prosperity for everyone. Housing supports positive youth and child development. I don't know about you. Carlie was saying earlier about the problems in classrooms when you have a lot of turnover of children due to housing instability. You can't go to school if you don't have stable housing. And if you're living in a place that you feel is unsafe, it's very hard to do your homework and very hard to do the things you need to do to live every day and go to school. It also allows us to meet the diverse needs of our complex labor market. Without having quality educational experiences for everyone, we will not have the workforce that we need. And if we continue to build our best schools in places that only serve part of our population, we are not, as we become a more diverse society, we're going to lose. We're going to be in a situation that will not be one of prosperity. And the third thing that Dr. Reese talks about is resilience. Things change. People lose jobs. People have children. We need to have some resilience built into our lives. And with inclusive communities, this means that we can meet changing household needs. People aging out. How many people who are in Bexley are aging out of living in Bexley? They don't need the big houses anymore, and they can't find a place to live still in Bexley. Or if you don't have a family of a certain size, how possible is it to find a place? Can you rent? Maybe you need to rent for a few years because you have a job change. Can we still stay in Bexley if that happens? Unlikely. So housing needs change over the lifespan, and housing, a variety of types of housing in a community facilitates the inclusion of people in that community over time. And it creates a lot more flexibility in the housing market to address social and economic changes. So this concludes Dr. Reese's slides. I want to talk a little bit about some things that Carlie Booth talked about earlier, which is the question of who are we talking about here? And then I want to talk a little bit about how do you build inclusive communities in a landlocked community like Bexley. So this is from a website called Paycheck to Paycheck. If you Google Paycheck to Paycheck, you can put in the metropolitan area, and then you can pick jobs, and it will tell you how much it costs to, let's see if I can do this. No, that's not a button. Oh, well. Oh, here we go. So it tells you how much it costs in this case to buy a home at what's it, it's like 3% down and 10% down, how much you need to earn for a salary. And then these are all the different kinds of jobs that people might have that might want to buy those homes. So a hairstylist makes $26,000 a year, a preschool teacher, $30,000, a paralegal, $47,000, postal service clerk, $48,000, daycare, $50,000, firefighters, $62,000, $65,000, registered nurses, secondary school teachers, $71,000, computer programmers, and educational administrators. So we see that only two of these, I just randomly chose, right? You could choose any number of different jobs. But in this case, only these two actually could afford, and it's not even putting down 20%. It's putting down either 10% or 3% on a house. And in terms of a rental unit, so this is, let's see, this is the income you would need to afford a studio, $29,000, to afford a 1-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, a 3-bedroom, a 4-bedroom home. And then we have the same array of occupations here. And even in the rental market, we know it's too much. Now, these are people that live around our community, serve our communities, but they can't afford to live in our communities. So this is who we're talking about when we talk about affordable housing. So in a landlocked suburb, what do we do? Right, we're built out. What do we do? Well, there are a few things. We can allow for accessory dwelling units in our zoning code. We can allow for multifamily housing. We can give density bonuses when people build affordable housing. We can give property tax relief for affordable housing. And we can have mixed income buildings, where some of those units are set aside for people with incomes that are less than, say, 60% of area median, and are those that a firefighter or a registered nurse might earn. So first of all, what's an accessory dwelling unit? Well, okay, if we have a house, here's a house, detached house, right? And next to it, we have a little building. Maybe it's a garage. Well, maybe we convert that garage to a house for someone else, or an apartment. Maybe they take their attic and make it into an apartment. Maybe there's a basement apartment. Maybe there's a unit above a garage, or a entire garage conversion. That's an accessory dwelling unit. And you can see where, when we start to get age, when I know for me, it would have been lovely for my mother to be able to live nearby in my backyard. Or you could rent it to a student. So it doesn't have to be for profit necessarily. Multifamily housing. These are pictures of two multifamily houses that are for sale in Columbus right now. Multifamily. By the way, these are duplexes. That's multifamily housing. Multifamily housing does not necessarily need to be high rise, 5 or 6 stories tall with 80 units, right? We can increase our density in Bexley in very gentle ways that would be in keeping with how our neighborhood looks right now. Now, some places are able to give what they call a density bonus for housing, for affordable housing. In this case, suppose there is you have a lot you want to build housing on, and this is 20. If this we don't have 25 acres in Bexley, but if you had 25 acres, you could build a certain number of homes on it. In this case, this would be 10 homes. If the developer said, you know, I'm going to build affordable housing on that lot, you can say, well, then you could build much more than 10. You could build, what's this, like 15? And then you could build some houses that are sold to people making between 80 and 150% of median. So people who are what we might call moderate income, and then some that are workforce housing. And that's the density bonus means that the developer can actually make a little more money on the units by building more densely. And I'm just going to go very briefly, a fee waiver and tax relief. Basically, if you agree to build affordable housing, a developer would get a waiver on the taxes. Personally, I don't think either of these are really effective. They're not strong enough tools to mandate affordable housing. And then, of course, mixed income development, which we have happening through our LIHTC projects here on Cassidy and on Livingston, which is basically a single development, single building. And some of the units in that building are reserved for people who earn below 60% of area median income. So we can do this. We can be the first community in Central Ohio to solve the problem, which I love Carlie saying that. And I think that we have a lot more to talk about tonight after the presentation about how we actually do this. And I'm going to hand the floor to Kim.
Thank you, Rachel. So I'm the other academic that has statistics for you. Everything in nursing is evidence-based. So let's see here. All right. So just to give you some facts that are going to help you understand everything really that you've heard. You've heard Carlie, you've heard from Rachel, and the other presenter, was it Jason? Jason, yes. That there are lots of wonderful creative ideas about how we're going to attack this issue here in Columbus. But just to give you some context, first, I would like to talk about the whole issue of housing affordability. This isn't new because things have changed. This has been going on for quite some time. And just so for those that are tracking, my information is coming from the Journal of Housing Economics. And I'm still learning, by the way. I'm a board member, but this topic is near and dear to my heart. And so I want to educate and learn as much as I can. So I thought I would provide you with this context just to give you some idea of where we are coming from. So it is well established that affordability is the main housing problem facing lower resourced income households and is a key rationale for housing policy. It has been since 1920. In 1920, the banks adopted a week's wages for a month's rent rule of thumb, equivalent to 25% housing costs to income ration. The cost burden measure has been debated virtually since its inception. The fraction of household income devoted to housing costs or housing cost burden, remains the standard for defining housing affordability by both the government and the private sector. The ratio was increased from 25 to 30% in the early 1980s and has remained there ever since. Despite the central importance of housing cost burden measure and of housing affordability more generally to housing policy, until recently, research has not examined the effect of affordable housing on residents. So about 2014, you had the Kirwan Institute, who's here at The Ohio State University, and other entities that have really pressed on this because it is becoming more and more of an issue. As it relates to housing in schools, the importance of engagement for educators and education advocates, because they are very central to this issue as well. Housing and land use policies have a significant effect on schools. They affect enrollment trends, of course. Housing and school policies can have profound impacts on housing patterns, especially in relation to residential choices and housing costs for families with school-age children. Housing and school policies have a strong reciprocal effect on patterns of racial and economic segregation, which makes it especially important for educators and education advocates who understand the benefit of school integration to become involved in housing and land use policy. However, I will just say from the research, they are sort of slow to the table, as to speak. School and school district boundary lines themselves can have a big impact on housing patterns. The benefits for educators and education advocates of working together with housing official and housing coalitions, like Carlie, include the possibility of reducing student turnover and churning by keeping children in the same school attendance zone, ensuring that students with high housing insecurity and at risk of homelessness have more stable housing, addressing declining enrollment by bringing more housing for young children into the local school district, and increasing student diversity in high-income school districts while reducing segregation and poverty concentration in lower income districts. In the last year of the Obama administration, the Secretaries of Housing and Education and Transportation similarly called on state and local housing and education leaders to work together to further fair housing and school integration, which has slowly taken place. Also, educators living and working in higher income communities should speak up in support of affordable housing proposals in their communities, stressing the value of racial and economic integration for all students in the town or the area where they live. And then how housing can determine health, education, economic outcomes. It goes without saying that many social issues stem from a history of unstable, unaffordable, and poor housing quality. Research shows that housing is the first rung on the ladder to economic opportunity for individuals, and that a person's access to opportunity is intrinsically linked with that of the community at large. As the gap between rents and income widens, it is critical that professionals in fields outside of housing, including health, education, and economic development, among others, understand its central importance. Housing and neighborhood conditions shape outcomes across a variety of domains. There are at least 5 aspects of housing shape educational outcomes. That's affordability, stability of tenure, structural quality, neighborhood characteristics, and management of on-site services. And some of the issues that affect individuals who lived in lower resourced areas. Basically, a study of single parent families have issues with financial instability, increased emergency room visits, hospitalizations, mental health, depression, and asthma triggers, believe it or not. The stable housing helps family and children avoid disruptive effects of constant moving to new schools and communities. So what is so wonderful about Move to Prosper, and if you don't know now, you know, or will know, that Move to Prosper is one of the tools in this community who is putting a toolbox, something in the toolbox for creating inclusivity. And just so you know a little bit about what Move to Prosper does, we work with single moms to give them opportunity to choose where they would like to raise their children, instead of that choice being dictated by where they can afford to rent. The three components of this model: they rent support in higher resource communities. We offer individual life coaching. This is not social service, we do coaching. So we coach them on housing, mobility, and stability, which is learning your rights and responsibilities as a tenant, so they learn that. Financial capability, we help them with their budgeting, money in, money out. How does that work for them? Education and career, we partner with their child's school, and we also help those individuals who are parents to with employment, better employment, and then health and wellness, cooking nutritionally. I didn't know you had them. Okay. Because I didn't create them, so get it? And then there are monthly programs that we offer for them. And then why Central Ohio? Because we're like that, we're good. We are second in the nation to economic segregation. Did anybody know that? Because I didn't know that. We did have one person that did. Move to Prosper children, they're in their newer, healthier homes. They've had 20 fewer emergency room visits per year. Remember, I mentioned previously that a lot of the data shows that the visits for individuals in lower resourced homes experience that. You also get to see here children in higher opportunity neighborhoods have a higher average lifetime earnings of $302,000, which results in 5.4 million higher lifetime earnings for Move to Prosper children. Is that wonderful or not? It is. Do I have anything else on there? Also, the Move to Prosper children in their newer, healthier homes have had 20 fewer emergency room visits per year, resulting in $30,000 annual healthcare savings. And I can tell you that there are lots of individuals, I know here about Carmel, they use the emergency room like it's their primary care, facility, and that is very expensive to do. So this program is having an awesome impact in this area as well. Also, for the moms who Move to Prosper, 58% of them have an average increase in earned income. The stories are very compelling, and that results in their total annual earned income increase of about $150,000. And that's all that I have for you.
Your comments, your questions, your suggestions into the chat box. We're going to have somebody funneling them up to the stage here. Anybody who's in the audience here in person with us and you've got thoughts you'd like to share, definitely we're going to have a microphone coming around. Shiloh is here to help with that. I'm going to go ahead and ask the first question. My moderator authority to do that, to get us rolling. And as you guys are having a seat, I just kind of want to bring everybody into a conversation that has been really, really active in the affordable housing world, which is both and, right? And I know you guys all know what I'm about to do, but we talk about the need to have both and solutions. We need to be able to help people thrive in the community that they live in the community that they love, where they have access to family and churches and networks, and to be able to preserve and revitalize the communities that are in our town. But we also need to emphasize choice and the fact that if you were not in a community that you feel is meeting your individual family's needs, you have the ability to exercise consumer power and go to somewhere where you can get that. I'm wondering if you can talk about what both and means in your line of work and how you look through that lens.
So both and, when I've been teaching housing policy for a very, very long time. And the argument used to be about people versus place. We want to address poverty, we want to address relative deprivation. How do we do that? And places reflect the incomes. There are some places in this country that have had a lot of investment throughout the last 90 years. And there are lots of places in this country that have not had that investment due to policy. These are places that the 1930s HOLC maps lined, designated as poor investments. And we have the legacy of that to contend with today. And so when we say both and, it means that we need to bring back investment into neighborhoods that have been left behind. And it needs to be investment that's inclusive, that preserves affordable housing for the people in those neighborhoods, so that folks who want to stay are able to do so. Because we know what happens when we start to improve neighborhoods. What happens? Housing prices go up. So one should not be doing community development without making sure you're also doing affordable housing.
When you talk about the HELOC maps, what you're talking about is redlining,
Yep.
where in the 30s and on, the
50s.
government refused to issue mortgages, converting entire neighborhoods into communities of renters against their will.
They refused to insure mortgages, is actually what happened. So during the Depression, basically homeowners were losing you guys really want to know all this? Homeowners were losing their properties. Mortgages at that time were not what we're used to. We're used to these like 20-year, 25, 30-year mortgages that we pay it over time in equal amortized amounts every month. That's not what a mortgage was. A mortgage was you borrow money and then there's a balloon payment due at the end. And so we had a complete revolution in how we lend, how we do our lending. The big change was the amortized loan, though, this amortized loan. And to increase confidence in lending, the federal government started to insure mortgages. And this insured mortgages in the 30s, but also, especially after the Second World War, we saw the FHA, Federal Home Administration mortgages, and they would not insure mortgages in what were these bad investment neighborhoods, the red neighborhoods, where it wasn't just folks who were people of color, it was also Mexicans, Jews, other people were redlined at that time, equal opportunity redlining at that time.
Thank you for the background. Was there more?
No, I just want to, but so the both and is that we have an obligation to invest in these neighborhoods, but the other thing we also can do is make sure that people have a choice about where they live, because only certain people have choices about where they live. And those are the people who can afford to make that. And I have to say, we can afford where we live. I know that in my own family, my father was in a World War II vet, and he got a loan through the GI Bill. He went to school for the GI Bill. And I am able to go to school and get a PhD, and I have a brother who's a doctor because my father, who was able to get those loans to go to school and able to get a house and get a home loan. Folks of color did not do that. That didn't happen. So there are a lot of advantages that we have in our society that some of us got because we looked a certain way. And others didn't get those advantages. And so it's up to us to create choices where we can.
So I think that's a great segue to one of the questions that I had, and I'm going to ask this to you in particular, Kim, but Mayor Kessler started about talking about how housing isn't a detriment, right? Like this, it doesn't need to be a sad story. It doesn't need to be a crisis. It can be a solution. It can be a success story. And I think that was your famous success story. I'm wondering if you've seen in your line of work other successes, how housing has served as a foundation for something greater.
That's a great question. Actually, I was thinking about both and actually, because I work in the Franklinton neighborhood. And I've been there 15 years. And I'm not from, Columbus, but having lived in that community with those individuals in terms of work, because I feel like I live at work, but the whole transition of moving the hospital, Mount Carmel West at the time, to Grove City, and then all the town hall meetings and, people feeling the way they did about their community, I learned so much. And I quickly learned that there's much diversity in that community. There's diversity both racially and economically. And we also saw that there were going to be changes, meaning the new condos, apartments, wherever on Broad Street. I mean, somebody came in, I think, from the city and showed, and some of the residents said, okay, so what about us? Because there were aspects of their community that they didn't want to change. There were students that we had that said, I like going to school here. I sort of want to live here if you're going to be building new things. And long story short, it appears that the things that folks thought of weren't necessarily going to happen because, you've had students that I can't afford to live down the road on Town Street or wherever, where some apartments, and I'm like, you're kidding, right? And so, the discussion was that's sort of the same thing happened with the short north, and this is going to be like, and so, I do wonder, and I think about those meetings that we had and those individuals who lived in those homes for years. And some folks have decided to really upgrade what they have. They want to stick around, and other people said, I'll sell. And then someone else made the comment that, well, that'll go like that, because even though it's Franklinton, there's nothing left in the area. So it just leaves us to wonder what's to come of that community, long term, because it seems as though there was a lot of good talk on the front end, but there hasn't been the following. Again, that's just my perception.
So there are 2 communities in Columbus that I think have done this really well. And one of them is actually Wineland Park. I know it looks like it's a place that's become very gentrified, but I have to say millions of dollars went into that community to preserve affordable housing of all different kinds. And so that's actually quite an economically diverse community right now. The second place is the community that's served by Community for All People, where there was a front page story. Sorry?
John Edgar.
Thank you for John Edgar this past weekend and his retirement from the Church for All People. But he has had in his mind that 15% of that neighborhood should be affordable rental. And that's been his target. And that's what he's done. So as the neighborhood improves, you still have affordability there for people.
I mean, those are 2 really great examples of change, and change coming to a community, whether it was ready for it or not in some cases, and housing being part of the responsible response and saying we're going to protect and expand as much as we can. What do you think about that? Do you have ideas about where we can build on some of those strategies?
Well, that is a good question. I still can't get that community out of my mind because, I've been there for so long and care about the individuals that I've grown accustomed to. I don't know that I see things happening as quickly as it probably could or should. And I'd also like to know, the one thing I always heard was, well, nobody's going to come, let's go back to the college. They're not going to come to school here because it's not safe. I'm like, we've been here 118 years. I mean, people have come here. People love this community. And of course, you have a whole different perspective. And my thing is, so if there's an issue, then why are we not trying to address that issue? Because I took a journey and went further west into an absolutely wonderful community. I cannot think of it. I mean, there was a little pond and a park, and was it Westgate? Yes. And so I'm like, okay, this is lovely. I mean, I'm not understanding. And again, I don't have that historical perspective, but I'm like, I just don't know that we should give up on, because there's so many people in need, and because of the close proximity to downtown. We don't need to stop just at where Gravity or whatever that place is. there. That there are so many other gems in the community, I think, that could be looked at, utilized, resourced, that are not really being addressed. You know, I see some schools, old churches that aren't necessarily being utilized. I'm like, what's happening here? Then, and I know the artists are moving into some spaces as well, which is great. But
Neighborhoods need to be adopted,
yeah,
basically.
it's like,
So on in the south side, that's you basically had an adoption of a neighborhood by Nationwide Children's Hospital. And over the past 20 years, they've learned a lot about affordable housing.
and that Reeb or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
And right. And I would say that OSU and Funders Collaborative adopted Wineland Park. So you need a corporate sponsor. So I think you should get Carmel. Carmel to
Hey,
adopt
I'll get right
Franklin
on that.
Towns.
Yeah.
So I what a fantastic pivot. And please, if there's questions, anybody would like to jump in. Hey. If you could, just for those who are listening, I don't know if you've got a microphone, say your name and, you know, if you're representing anyone.
Hi, my name is Joe Motil. I'm an affordable housing advocate. And this question's for Dr. Is it Kleit or Kleit? Kleit. Thank you. Could you explain just briefly your position on why you view fee waivers as being ineffective?
My position on fee waivers of being is ineffective is because it's not a big enough incentive. That's why. In other words, so the idea behind fee waivers and property tax relief is that you have such a hot market that those fee waivers are going to make the difference between this development happening and not happening. And our market is hot, but it's not that hot. There's other places to go to build stuff. So it's not a mandate. It's if you want to do this, we can give you, you can build here anyway, even without the fee waiver. So why would you do it? If you can build. So unless there's some huge profit that someone can get, it's going to be a pretty ineffective tool. That's what I think.
Do you feel the set aside units for tax abatements are effective?
No.
Other questions?
This is for Dr. Kim. Has there been studies with the Move to Prosper on what the participants are looking for when they're choosing locations? You said they get to choose the zip codes and schools they want to go to. Has there been any data from that to like what are the things that they look for in a neighborhood that if they had a choice for any neighborhood to move to?
Trying to think. Yeah, go ahead.
So the question was, what kinds of things do the folks who participate in Move to Prosper think about when they look at neighborhoods? That was the question, right?
Yeah, like is there like a list of things that matter to them and is it ranked in any way from
So
statistical?
one of the things that there are a couple of things to know about people who move through Move to Prosper. The first thing is that they can't just move to any neighborhood. So but they don't have a housing voucher. We have landlords that have said, we're going to put aside a couple of units for your folks. And so they can move that. So their choices are to move to neighborhoods that are what we call high opportunity, where there's a unit that's available for them in that community. And so those communities are Gahanna, Reynoldsburg. Oh my gosh, I'm going to get them. Olentangy, thank you. These are my colleagues here. Olentangy, Dublin, and now so Dublin School District, soon Bexley, yay, soon Bexley. So we haven't done a study of what they look for, but I can tell you that there's a chain. The reason we do coaching is because people come in wanting to say a house, right? And they're not really thinking about neighborhood. And so one of the things we do when we do housing stability coaching is we talk about all these things we've been talking about tonight, about the importance of neighborhood, the importance of the relationship between neighborhoods and schools. And so there's two things. One is their choices are limited to these places that we have set out that are in high opportunity neighborhoods. And secondly, they get coaching around this. So no, we haven't studied them because it's kind of a moving target, I would say.
And another thing, just so you know, the landlords that do agree to participate, and by the way, she's been there from the beginning, so she's the best person. But one thing that impressed me about the program is they all participate in implicit bias training. So they're not just people that say, hey, we have these. There's an agreement and there are certain conditions before we would just place individuals in those units.
Let me just say real quick, there were 11 we had 2 landlords that made 11 complexes available throughout around the outer building. Okay, I mean, and the families could choose any of those complexes. There were units available in any of those complexes, you know, for them to live. And when I say they were available, what you find out when you talk to landlords is that even though they're 95, 96, 97% occupied units, those units turn over 40 to 50% a year, just that they're filled very quickly. So there were always going to be units in almost any of those complexes available at some point in time. So they got to choose, you know, did they choose because it was close to where they were working? All the 2 things, all the women in Move to Prosper, all the mothers, all had full-time jobs and all that. Those were 2 of the criteria.
So this is, I want to say that Steve Heiser, so and by way of full disclosure, Steve Heiser and I are 2 of the founders of Move to Prosper. So
So he
Steve-
should be up.
So Steve knows what's going on. There was another question right here.
Oh yeah. My name is Peyton. I'm with Culture People U in Crafted Culture Brewery. The biggest question I have is like, what do you think it's going to take for people to get past seeing housing as in just a profitable opportunity instead of looking at the bigger picture of us and being able to live a quality life? Because right now I just feel like people just see it as, you know, hey, you go into building areas, and you make a profit. What do we have to do to get people past that point to say, hey, listen, we got a picture here. I mean, how do we present that? Because this is, like you were saying earlier, this is nothing new. This has been going on for generations and times. A lot of people that have been affected back in the 20s and whenever are still those people who are still affected. Has the numbers gotten better? Yeah, but we're still seeing the same song and dance with that. We see like big projects come in. We have a lot of big projects on the table right now, and we find money for these projects, but we never seem to be able to fix our issue with equal opportunity housing for everyone, and getting past what people look like and where they come from, and the lack of opportunity to say the least. Because we show like when you come from a harder background, you have, higher crime rates, higher convictions, less opportunities for second chances. And this all impacts, it's not really housing, it's about, who do we want in our communities?
Mhm.
And then if we can't get if we don't want certain people in our communities, we just shut the doors to it. And so how do we get past that? How can we get to the place where we're like, we see each other as individuals and people and say, if we all help each other, this is all going to be better for everyone. Does anyone, I mean, that's a very complex question, but I feel like we're still playing Monopoly still, and it's been going on for decades.
I would just say the fact that we're sitting here at the Bexley Library and we have the mayor sitting here and the community is Bexley, where most people feel that they would not participate in a program like this, speaks volumes. And I think you need more of that to start. That's my 2 cents.
And someday, I mean, there are places around the country that have made this decision. And I'm not going to go into all of them right now, but when I take my class. Anyway,
Well, and one
The
of the
sequel.
things, if I could just kind of from a dollars and cents standpoint, it costs money to build housing, it costs money to operate housing. I mean, that's not going to blow anybody's socks off, right? We all get that. And when I think about these things, I kind of have a little bit of a waterfall that I go through in my mind, right? And right now, our average home sale price is $330,000. Central Ohio, $330,000. It would take 6 or 7 full-time minimum wage jobs to be able to buy that. That's more hours than we have in the week. You'd have to create days to be able to buy the average home in our community. But if we start there and just say, okay, well, we're going to build a house, it's going to be $330,000. There are some people who can afford that. You don't need to do anything for them to be able to achieve that. There are a lot of people who can't. So what solutions do we have in the toolbox that we can activate? Well, if you want to make that home affordable to somebody who's earning 100, 180% of area median income, a median white collar worker, right? Somebody who's in the workforce. What you need to do for that is you need to lower the cost just slightly, right? You can do that through a tax abatement. You can do that through a low cost loan. You can do that through tinkering around with the amenities. Maybe you don't add a pool. Maybe you don't add balconies and you just lower the cost to build it. If you want to pull it down even further, make it affordable to somebody who's at 60% area median income. Typically to do that, you do those first few things as well. Now you also have to add some sort of construction offset, the low income housing tax credit, the home program, some sort of funding program. We're really focused on construction. You want to make it affordable to somebody who's at 30% of the area median income, which is basically a couple both earning minimum wage, people who are fighting every day to pay their rent. You have to do all the first one, to do all the second tranche. Now you also have to add some sort of operating offset because that household isn't making enough to just cover the cost of taxes, cover cost insurance, cover the cost of hiring someone to come out and shovel the lawn, mow the grass, maintenance and upkeep, and making sure that property remains safe. So you've got the zoning issues, you've got the tax incentives, you've got the low income housing tax credit and the cross structure. Now you also have to add something like a housing choice voucher on top of it. And that's because it just costs more to build and to operate housing than most folks can afford. So what that does is it makes it a community conversation. Where are our priorities? Are we creating the programs that are necessary to do this? It's policy, it's investment, it's everything.
Other piece that I'd like to add here is that you can do all of that and still not have that house be affordable over the long run. Right? So you have to also think about, is there a land trust that can buy the land and rent the property? Is there some deed restriction I can put on that property so that when it turns over to people affordably? So you're making that investment. All of those investments you're making once rather than every single time you want. There's a guy with there's a question of, sorry.
And actually, and because we've got a couple coming in from
Okay.
online and maybe we can go left, right, and balance it out. I don't want the Facebook crew to feel like we're not getting to their questions. So this one from Facebook is, how are we and how can we work with grocery stores and other services to ensure that those services are available to all neighborhoods?
Gosh, I think we still need more grocery stores from what I'm hearing. I know, again, being on the west side, where we are, you have to go all the way down to the brewery district to even get to a grocery store. So that's the first thing. I know that there have been individuals who have tried to start that up, and from what I understand, it's sort of not been real popular to do so. I'm not sure what all the economic involvement is in terms of doing that, but not having appropriate foods. I know when, the Lower Lights entity came in and they were trying to do a grocery store right there off of Broad Street. And everybody's like, this is great, this is great. And for whatever reason, could not continue to make a go of it. And so I think that in and of itself is a whole other issue. Why wasn't that sustainable? How come, we couldn't make that work? Because I thought that would be perfect for that area because there was nothing else close by.
Rachel, in your presentation, you talked about density, and density is a little scary of a word for some people. I understand that. But that's directly related to services, right? Grocery stores look at how many people could be their consumer base
That's
before
right.
they decide whether to grow.
Right, they assess the market.
Will you
That's
talk
right.
a little more about that?
Right. So, well, I don't know necessarily about grocery stores, So I'm being quiet here. No. But I do know, I mean, in terms of looking at market area, a grocery store is gonna know how much what the purchasing power is of a certain density and income range for a neighborhood. And they're gonna know how much they need to have in that neighborhood for them to make a particular profit. And unless you have strong community advocacy, like actually for the Bexley market, we had very strong community advocacy. It was not necessarily a shoe-in that there was going to be a market there, right? So that's really, I mean, but I really know very little about this topic. So
But I think the top line that I'm taking away is if you want amenities, you have to have the people who can use them.
that's
You're
true.
going to look at
Yep.
how many folks are possibly in that community. More people, more groceries.
So there is purchasing power in communities that have less money though, and they can be quite dense. So the question is whether that's the purchasing power the community, the grocers are looking for.
Thank you very much. I don't know how to say this question, but seems like in a hot market right now, you've got private sector developers who are, who do what private sectors do, look for the best return on their investment. And then you've got government that has a role somewhere. I think about Franklinton. I look at probably a bunch of people salivating over the land there. They don't make more land, so it's just there. What's the role of government in a market like this? What can government do to ensure that there's a place for low-income folk?
Okay, so you're gonna get my unvarnished opinion on my soapbox, okay? What we need to be doing is being able to take profit from the market and use it to use it to build affordable housing. So we're still not at New York hot, however, so we're hot market. The question is, if you start mandating affordable housing in properties, when people build, you give density bonuses and all that. The question is, are you going to have a legal issue? That's the first thing. Can we do this in the state? Which I don't know. Maybe someone out there does know. And the second question is going to be, given that we don't have any kind of boundary around our communities, if you have a mandated inclusionary housing in Columbus, why wouldn't someone just go to Dublin to build? So it has to be regional for it to work effectively. So in Montgomery County, Maryland, it's county level, right? And the count, and they've had it for 25 years. Actually, no, sorry, now it's 35 years. I've gotten older. And they've built over 30,000 units of affordable housing over that time through inclusionary housing. But we need a state environment that we can do that in. And we need to have it be for everywhere, not just in one place. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So the other tactics are things that we as a community can do. So we got to focus on what we can control, right? So as a community, we can control development, which is what the two properties that are going to on Livingston and Cassidy are. That's the first step. We can control zoning as a community. So what do we need to look at in our zoning laws, Mr. Mayor? I don't know. So what kind of affordable housing fund can we set up in our own community? Are there opportunities to use deed restricted housing, other kinds of tools for long-term affordability in our own community? There are lots of ways to think about this. They require resources as well as political will.
Well, and I think if I could jump in too, that I think our elected officials understand the problem. I think that everybody in Central Ohio, you'd have to be blind not to look out at the landscape and say something isn't clicking right here. I do think that we as citizens and as residents have an obligation to join the conversation too. And maybe that just means picking up the phone and calling your area commissioner or calling your zoning committee or calling your council person and saying, here's what my life looks like right now. It's June 29th, and I don't know what I'm gonna do on July 1st for rent. Not necessarily having the solutions, but having the courage for each of us to say that this is a problem that's affecting me in XYZ ways. It's affecting my children. I've got a 19-year-old at home. He can't move out. He can't find a place to live, right? I've got a cousin who's 35, wanted to buy a home 10 years ago and still can't find the inventory. I think just being able to articulate the stories and share them broadly is something that we can all do to help make sure those people who have the resources, who have the leadership, who have the power, understand what this looks like for their community. And that might be different in Bexley than it is in the city of Columbus, than it is in Reynoldsburg. But I don't know that we're ever going to get to a place where we have all of the solutions on the table unless all of us are exercising our voice to say, here's what it means to me and why I find this important.
Here. I was also going to say that, it all starts with us and being able to have those conversations. I know that we had a forum at the Metropolitan Club. And I thought that was a great opportunity. There were lots of banter and talk. And, somebody had asked a question, alluded to, well, if there's individuals, if there are areas that really need help, why aren't you just revitalizing those areas, period? And that's a separate issue. And, what we were trying to get people to understand is we know that revitalization needs to take place. But, one of the things Move to Prosper does and what people should have the opportunity to do is have choices. If they want to go to a different area, they want their children to be educated in a different area, they should have that choice. That's all that we're saying. We're not trying to pull folks away from one area to put them in another. It's about choice. But I don't know that we can get everybody in the same table if people aren't having the discussions and talking.
So I'm noticing there's no clock in here, Kathy or Shiloh. If I am going way over, please flag
It's
me out.
7:45. I've got a question here and a question here, but you've got one from online.
Yes,
Okay.
so this is another question regarding Move to Prosper. Besides improvements in ER usage in the emergency room utilization, was there also an improvement in the lost work time for the moms? Can you talk more about what that looked like?
I don't know much about what it looked like. I just,
Well, and if I can, and I'm trying to translate from a question online.
Right,
I don't know,
right.
But when we reached out to employers, we said, is the housing crisis affecting your bottom line? And they said, yes, it absolutely is. Because when you go through a housing crisis, if you're going through eviction, if you're worried about it, that stress doesn't check its baggage at your home front door. It walks with you into work. And you are less able to get to work. You're less able to focus when you're at work. We know from empirical research that if you go through a displacement, usually an eviction, you're more likely to lose your job immediately after for a lot of different reasons. I would imagine all of that contributes to moms who are participating in Move to Prosper
being stable.
better
Being
stable at work.
Stable at work. Right.
Mhm, exactly.
There was one story. One of our original.
Can I ask, pardon,
Mike-
will you run the microphone over so I want our online people to be able to hear.
They couldn't hear my voice. Thank you. There is one story for Move to Prosper. An employer read about Move to Prosper in the paper somewhere, heard about it, and had an employee who was missing days of work because had to leave work early to take her child to the emergency room for asthma attacks, things such as that. Because the woman lived, the business was in Dublin. I think she lived in the city of Columbus, and it was a long ride, get back and forth. So but he saw a lot of potential in her. So he went to her and said, I want to show you about this program. I think you should apply. I think this might help you. She did apply. She was accepted. And it changed her life. I will say this, she's no longer working for that employer, but she now has a better job. She's earning more money. The employer was great. Don't get me wrong. He was wonderful, but he suggested to her, and it changed the trajectory of her job and her life.
Well, and if I can build on the theme that I mentioned earlier about Columbus and Central Ohio and our region being exceptionally well equipped to solve this crisis, the work that Move to Prosper did has created a whole new mindset of how we approach housing and how we use it as a launch pad for something bigger. And one of the programs that has come up since then looks at this issue from a different perspective, a different angle, but it's called Resiliency Bridge. And it's a program that we got to be a little bit at the ground floor of, and we talked to people who were working full-time, usually 40 or 50 or 60 hours a week, multiple full-time jobs sometimes, who were still not able to pay rent at the end of the month. And we said, why? Like, obviously you're a killer worker, right? You're getting up and putting in 60, 70 hours. You've got the work ethic. You've got employee of the month down the wall at the grocery store. Why aren't you moving up the career ladder, right? Why aren't you going from the best entry-level employee to the best manager? And they said with pretty uniform voice, well, that takes a certification, right? I need to have somebody who on paper says that I'm good enough for that next job. That certification program is a 40-hour-a-week gig. My job today is a 40-hour-a-week gig. My kids are a 40-hour-a-week gig. Which one of these full-time jobs do you want me to give up to get the education that I need to move up the career ladder? And when one of those balls that I'm juggling falls and it's my house or it's my kids, who's going to help me pick it up? And they just really laid it out that those resources aren't accessible to me. So what Resiliency Bridge does is says, if you're willing to take that risk and make that investment in yourself, we'll pay for your housing. We'll pay for your workforce education. We'll pay for your childcare, for your food, for your utilities, whatever it is that you need. It's going to be short, but intensive, because our bet is after that, you've got an on-ramp. I mean, these are tech jobs. These are healthcare jobs. These are six-figure-a-year jobs. You just need a little extra help to get there. And that was the foundation that was laid in Central Ohio. And we are the only ones in the world who are doing this kind of work right now. We can copy and paste that all day, every day.
Hi, my name is Devin. Thank you for being here tonight. We really appreciate it. It feels good to talk about affordable housing. We talk about it here in our community, and something that's been a point of contention is it's easy to talk about it when it's not right next door to your house, meaning a mixed income development coming in a few feet from your house. What do you say to those individuals who don't see any benefit in having a 3-story unit built on the corner of Livingston and Francis, where they would specifically benefit, where maybe they've worked really, really hard to get into the home and afford the home that they have, and now they face the prospect of something that looks a little bit different. What would you say to them as far as a benefit, or how can that be sold to them?
I bet their property value is going to increase because there'll be more housing nearby. Because when you build quality affordable housing in a neighborhood, it increases the property values because you're improving the quality of the housing in that place. That's what the research says. I'm sorry.
So when these developments go into low-income neighborhoods, they tend to increase the value of the properties there by about 5.5%, which is wonderful. But when they go into other neighborhoods, and understandably so, it tends to reduce the property values by about 2.5%.
I'm not sure which neighborhoods we're talking about. There are studies that were done by George Galster, who used to be at Wayne State University, where he looked at specifically at assisted housing and the location of assisted housing next to in nearby properties, looking at property values over time, and particularly in property values that were actually closer to the new affordable housing. Actually, we had higher values than those that were further away. So I don't want to argue this right now. You have your research that you've read. I have my research. We could probably talk about this all night. But I was just asked what I think, and I'm saying what I think.
It's a social good. I mean, generally, I'm in favor of doing something positive. So I'm not totally against you, but I think it has to be done in an intelligent and in a fair way, which I don't. And I'm speaking strictly about the Cassidy location. This is a relatively small lot. There's going to be no parking on the lot. The streets over there where I live, just around the corner, are packed with cars parked on each side. All right. You want to go both ways, cars coming opposite directions, forget it. And now you're going to bring in a 4-story structure, which is taller than anything else in the neighborhood. Let me tell you something. I've lived in Bexley for 24 years. My grandparents were some of the earliest settlers, sort of the earliest people in Bexley. They lived in South Bexley. Very good experience. I grew up in Berwick, and I had a very excellent experience there. If anybody knows Berwick local, wonderful. I've lived in Bexley, North Bexley for 24 years, and the schools did very well with my kids. And I'm happy for other people to have that too. But since I've lived in Bexley, and this is the part I'm unhappy about, is my mortgage has gone up. You know, my fixed rate mortgage has gone up about 35% since we moved in. And that's because everybody in Bexley always passes every referendum that goes on the bill, bless their hearts. You know, and then there's also the water bill, the utility bills are nearly rapacious. I mean, they're ridiculous. And the taxes, it's just expensive to live there. So all these years that I've lived there, it's not, you know, we've paid quite a bit for the benefits of Bexley. So therefore, and I don't speak just for myself, but for everybody who lives in North Bexley or on Cassidy, when you want to sell your house, you want to recoup your investment. I know property values have gone up, but from what I'm hearing, it's going to be like, well, it's going to be, okay, you're going to get about $8,000 less for your property when you sell than otherwise. So there, wait, I'm not.
Politely, if I can,
more
jump in, sir. And if you
It's
have.
just one thing. Let me make my point. You've been
I'm gonna ask
speaking,
you to real
you've been
quickly
speaking
go to
all
the
night.
question part, okay?
So there's other properties that I see in Bexley I think would be better candidates than asking everybody in our neighborhood to make that sacrifice. You can do the math. If there's 400 or 500 people there, 400, I don't know. It's a lot of money that's going to be lost. Still, I want to support your good, but there's a property right in the corner, a park of Bexley, the entranceway, so-called entranceway to Bexley at Main and right across from Kroger's. I forgot the cross
So
street there.
I would love to take this offline and keep talking because this is a
Should you get that
forum
with the development director?
that's really focused on the issue at large. And I don't know that any of us are as familiar with that particular project to do an answer to you justice. I would love for us to take this off and, you know, maybe loop in other community members who can do so a little bit further. But your question and your passion are phenomenal. And it's why we're here and why we all need to have a role in what this looks like for our community. Because for too long, housing is something that has been done to our communities, especially our communities of color, and not with them. And we have not listened as much. And I love that this energy is here because I think it is the exact right response, even if I might disagree with your studies, even if I might disagree with the research. And I think that to the broader question of what does mixed income communities look like? One of my personal experience has been City of Reynoldsburg, second hottest housing market in the country a few years ago. Second hottest market in the entire country, Reynoldsburg, Ohio, right down the street. Because it's affordable, because there's growth. And what people say when they go to Reynoldsburg, and I'll admit I'm from Reynoldsburg, so I'm a little bit biased. But I know that when I buy there, my kid can buy there, right? When he turns 18, gets his first job, whether he goes straight into the workforce or he goes to college, I know that he is going to have a space there. I've got parents who are in their 80s, and I think about how we are going to support them. And I don't want them to have to go to a nursing home before they are ready. I know that if we need to make an investment, that they can stay in a city like mine, because it's affordable, because there's options. And I will go to the schools as well, which is something that you mentioned. Having a diverse school system where you have people from different lived experiences, people from different backgrounds, people of different colors and races and ethnicities and religions. That's Reynoldsburg as the second hottest market in the country for a darn good reason, because it's fostering not just affordability, but this conversation, right? It is listening to people and it is growing at the pace that the people support.
Carlie, we have 3 minutes left. I have one here. You probably got a pile in your lap. What do you want to do?
We do have a whole pile. Y'all are gonna hate me, but I'm gonna exercise moderator discretion here. And I have a question because we're sitting in Bexley and you mentioned at the outset, Intel is coming and it is wonderful. It is remarkable. We are gonna have more jobs than I think anyone in Ohio has salivated over in a long time. It's an objective good. But as our workforce capacity grows, our housing capacity has to grow with it. And as experts, what would you say to a suburb who is looking at this and wondering where they start to dig in? What questions should people be asking?
Are you talking for housing
Yeah,
or?
yeah, let's start there.
I always get, what kind of jobs can I get? Which I don't know. I think that being mindful of, like, everybody's not going to live in New Albany, obviously. And transportation, you know, I had lived in Cleveland prior, so transportation was a little bit different there, even though it sounds like if I can land a job, then I can afford a car because the salaries are good. However, right now everybody's scraping to get some preparation for education because there's a lot of talk about, you know, you won't need the 4-year or the master's, you know, you can probably get an associate's degree. And so everybody's chomping at the bit. I mean, we've even been at the table to look at what kind of opportunities are available. And I think that's great. But I also think that people need to be realistic because education's not cheap. And if you were looking at the whole picture and you're looking at housing, which isn't cheap either, you know, how are you going to balance all of those things? Because I have students that, you know, and I don't just work with nursing students, I also teach at Franklin. And everybody's like, okay, how are we going to position this thing? And it's, you know, what's the strategy? What is your strategy? How are you going to make that work? Because I don't know that, I think people just look at what I can earn. Well, how are you going to be competitive? Who are you going to compete against? You know, where do you live now? Where do you want to live? So it's all those kinds of conversations.
There are too many. I think the question has to be, who do we want to live here in 20 years, 30 years? That's the question that we need to be asking ourselves. And we need to realize that we're going to experience a perfect storm if we don't do anything. And that perfect storm is going to raise our property values, which means our taxes will go up even more. And more people will be actually displaced from Bexley because they don't want to stay and pay the property taxes. So what kind of community do we want to be? Who do we want to live here? And how do we put in place policies that allow for the diversity that is healthy for a community? I think those are the questions to ask.
I can't think of a better note to begin to wind down on. I'm going to have one more question after I do a few announcements, but I want you to think about, this is a great start to a conversation, right? We've got so many people here in person, online. If somebody feels like they want to take the next step, what is a book? What is a podcast? What is a news article? Where would you suggest that someone goes next? And as you're thinking about that, I want to say thank you again to the library, to the mayor, and to the city of Bexley, to all of the sponsors who made today possible. I also really want to recognize the experts that we have on the stage tonight. And I can't say that emphatically enough, that these are two world-class minds that we are lucky to have. Kim and Rachel, you've been fantastic. We do have additional information online. I'm sure all of our Facebook pages and Twitters can be shared afterwards. For Move to Prosper in particular, it is movetoprosper.org. Before we close out of the Zoom session, I would certainly say that if there's anybody online who has additional questions, to get them in, and we can always follow up with you afterwards. Same for those who are in person with us. Thoughts, ladies, on the final parting question? Where can we go now?
So I think that I think you should follow the National Low Income Housing Coalition, actually. They have a weekly webinar about issues, national issues in housing. And it's an excellent, and they bring in national politicians to talk about current issues. So I don't know, that's my, and I think you should stay also in tune with Affordable Housing Coalition of Central Ohio.
Affordable Housing Alliance, Rachel.
Sorry.
Affordable Housing Alliance.
Alliance, not coalition, Alliance.
AHACO.org.
See, that's
Yes.
right. Well, I was going to say that as well, but to find out what resources, if you have any listed on the website, and to really dig into the community, because there are a lot of great resources within the community. I'm still learning.
Yeah.
You know, you've got wonderful universities here. There's no reason not to be better informed. And I applaud everybody for even coming out, and those who are online as well, to take the time on a Monday night to hear more.
Right. I can't thank this audience enough. You guys have been wonderful. Oh, the conversation is exactly where we need to be as a community. I would say that if you or someone you know is part of that 22% who don't know how they're going to pay rent next month, for the first time in my career, first time in my lifetime, we have the resources to help people stay in their homes. If you go to rentful614.com, it's rentful like hopeful, RENTFUL 614.com. I know not everybody in this room is going to be fighting this fight, but chances are you know somebody. If you can post about it on Facebook, if you can put a flyer up at your church, it helps somebody, even if you don't see it. Thank you. Thank you all. I believe that there are comment cards for those who are here in person with us. If you have suggestions for how this conversation continues to unfold. And again, I'm just deeply grateful and appreciative of this space and the time with you. Yeah.